Welcome to the All That We Are podcast, dedicated to exploring and celebrating the messy reality of being human. In these conversations, we will be discussing the many challenges and barriers we all face that prevent us feeling connected, fulfilled, and happy, and explore the ways we can create the lives we really want to live by understanding, accepting, and fully embracing all that we are. From our innate gifts and the things we've been taught to think of as our flaws, to our deepest unmet needs and desires that we feel shame over, we want to explore all the complexity that comes as a package deal simply by being human. Recognizing and accepting all of our true selves empowers us to authentically show up in all aspects of our lives. And now more than ever, it feels like the world needs as much acceptance and authenticity as possible. My name is Wyndham.
And my name is Lisa.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Yeah, all good. Looking forward to having a conversation about our wonderful podcast and all that we are.
It's taken us a little while to get here.
It has. Discussing why that is. By being human, basically.
Exactly, yeah. And a lot of that, I think, is going to fall into some of the later episodes. So some of the obvious challenges, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, all those kind of interesting topics, I think, will be a rich topic for conversation for us. But for this one, I think it'd be great if we could just introduce everybody to what this podcast is about and our take on it. So we are called the All That We Are podcast. What does that mean to you?
Well, from my interpretation of it and me exploring this with you and my own time, I feel that we are often encouraged to think or feel shame for being aspects of who we are and how we show up in the world. And with that means that we either hold back from things that we're capable of doing, feeling shameful. Sometimes it's patterns and behaviors that we've cultivated along the way, mainly to protect ourselves. And I really feel that this podcast is exploring all of that. And from a journey of self-discovery for myself for 15 years, I've looked into this a lot, unraveled a lot, and also like let go of things that maybe I should not have about myself, realizing that actually they're probably more of a gift, more of a talent, rather than it being something that needs to be like, let's put that away and you've got to reinvent yourself.
Yeah, really interesting. You used the word unraveled there, and I was listening to a podcast yesterday, maybe the day before, and they mentioned that Brené Brown had used this word, and unraveled to me anyway, has a context of like a negative thing, like we're losing cohesion, we're kind of breaking up. But it actually, like if you look at the word raveled, it's an impenetrable knot. And actually, so unraveling is just letting go sufficiently to kind of ease the parts of us apart so we can kind of see all of who we are and embrace it. It was suddenly one of those moments where you go, oh, language is very important, especially when we don't understand what it really means.
And I feel that we naturally put up barriers and ways to protect ourselves. And it's not because we've done anything wrong, it's because we want to try and survive. And I know we've discussed it before, is how we shape shift or morph ourselves in to fit into certain situations. And we start from a really young age because we want to be accepted. And I saw this this lovely image. It was actually based for children about school, saying that they are a star trying to go into, I think they said into a square or a circle, so a shape that didn't fit. So you cut off all the edges of your star, which are your sparkly bits, and actually they're the best bits.
Yeah.
Also, you can be accepted and to fit a certain way of being rather than being authentically yourself.
Yeah, and that specifically, I think, is such a powerful thing because we're exposed to, I call them inclusion criteria. So every group we're a part of has rules and has kind of ideas of who we need to be in order to be allowed to remain within it. And that's our family from an early age. And then school is a massive one because suddenly we have two sets of rules that we're having to try to navigate. And interestingly, you're talking about putting a star into a square or a circle. that's like a toy for kids, isn't it? And I understand it's pattern recognition, and it's okay, I need to fit this to that. But it's a really nice metaphor for it as well, because you're right. All of our edges, maybe not all, but a great deal of our edges get chamfered off. And it's like, actually, it's not safe for me to be weird or as big and as bold as I really am. So we make ourselves small, and that carries through into our later life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, again, it's something that we've discussed before is, again, so for me, I'm a highly sensitive soul. I'm a sensitive person, and I've always seen that as a negative. And I had a client recently who, every time it came up about her being sensitive, she saw it as a negative, because that's what she was known as a child to, you're being overly sensitive. Where
And
actually,
that's the key thing, isn't it? You're overly sensitive. Like there's a normal benchmark that above you're or below you're not normal.
absolutely. And who determines that? Because if you're
Yeah,
with somebody that then isn't sensitive, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that person either. It just means that you just experience life differently, but it's no right or wrong with that. And I guess through the exploration of this podcast, it's like, okay, well, then how do we unravel
yeah,
in a way that helps us heal and be our authentic self? Because maybe we've started to detach from that because it's been easier to do that than actually be authentic. And also, what does authenticity mean? I often say, being authentic, it's like, well, what does that actually mean? If you've totally disconnected from that, how you get back there is unraveling to
yeah,
get back
yeah,
there.
yeah. And it's one of those terms that is used so frequently as to almost have lost its meaning. And I agree with you completely. That whole, you're a highly emotive and emotional and empathetic person. And when you are in the company of people who are less so, and I'm picking my words carefully because my core belief is as human beings, we are emotion, full stop. All of the emotions, not just the ones we've been praised for as kids or brought up to think of as good or positive. Um, and so when we don't have the opportunity at a young age to kind of get to know our emotions and for it to be okay for us to be in an emotional state, then we become completely disconnected from them because we don't feel safe to express them. And if that happens at a young age, we never learn how to deal with our emotions. So we end up in this vicious cycle where we avoid them. And then that leads to all sorts of potential issues with how we mask those kind of things. And I think for me, this is an opportunity. These conversations are an opportunity to normalize all of that. So as you're saying, the idea of overly sensitive or highly sensitive, and I think you're right. There's a difference between sensitive and highly sensitive. I would question whether we really understand that truly, and whether or not we're all highly sensitive. There are just some people who are less, um, what's the word, inured to it. That might not be the word. Are less uh, distanced from it. So if I think of myself, I didn't know anything about my emotions for decades until I like repressed them all, and I wonder whether or not you didn't repress yours as much, so that you've always had a closer connection, or you haven't suppressed them as much as I did mine. So I've really had to start learning how to reconnect with them, and I wonder that when I do, whether I'll be highly emotional as well. I have to say I spend most of my days with my emotions just below my chin, and the slightest thing can bring tears to my eyes and go, oh my God, I'm about to lose it on a train.
Well, I think there's an element of that, and there's two things I want to say to that. So, being a yoga teacher, quite often at the end of my class, I will say, we are not our emotions, we are not our hormones, we are not whatever title we have as a wife, husband, mum, dad, all of that, coming back to the absolute essence of the soul, which isn't anything with any label on. And
Yeah.
it's interesting you're saying that I believe that we are all emotions, which, and it's an interesting one because it's a conflict, but I felt like even as a yoga teacher, then I've got it wrong. Even that, because I do feel my emotions and actually I do express them. And then the other thing is, yes, as we get more in touch with them, therefore we get more sensitive to our environment, sensitive, like you said, feeling them, tears just coming up very quick by watching something or hearing some nice music, like how we get touched by those kind of things. And also the other positive thing about them being sensitive is if you channel it, I mean, the most beautiful music is created, the most beautiful
Yeah.
poetry is made. Now, if you dulled all those emotions, then where would all that creativity come from?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And when you say at the end of your yoga class, you say we are not our emotions. I understand. I think I understand what that's trying to say. I think it's trying to say when we say I am sad, it isn't that we are sad. It's that I am experiencing sadness, but I'm separate and deeply connected to the emotion, or I am happy. Well, actually, it's I am experiencing happiness. I'm experiencing grief or joy or gratitude or pain, whatever it might be. So there is this interesting little dance around the definition of the I in I am, and then our emotions feeding information to us. I think ostensibly, I think they're little more, or sweeping statement, but I think they're little more than here's some information.
Yeah, and I guess by what the way you share it there is it's creating that space away from it. So from being someone that 15 years ago had severe depression, and again I was questioned even when I started my yoga training, what is depression? And we can either, and I know that this is a sensitive subject and it's not that I have any answers or I know the truth to this, I'm just exploring it, is I have learned over time that obviously everything passes. We know that that's a saying, this too will pass. But having that space away from that emotion, knowing that you are not that, you are, like you said, you are experiencing that at that moment. But everything shifts and changes. And it depends how much we want to, or we need to stay in that emotional state, be it sadness, even the joy, and being okay with that. And we talked about before how you can feel one thing and then quite quickly feel something else, and then I'm being a bit bipolar, which is
Yeah,
again, and I'm saying that in the not because I'm disrespecting that condition, but why does that need to be labeled that when children quite naturally do that? I guess over years I've just learning myself to sit with the uncomfortableness of the horrible emotions,
yeah,
to learn what I need to learn from it, but also to, well, I was listening to something the other day where I felt dysregulated, to re-regulate myself,
mm-hmm.
to soothe myself into, okay, I'm not all of that. That's just at the moment what I'm feeling. Actually, I'm still Lisa, and everything's okay. I'm through the other side.
Yeah. You said something earlier about kind of our core, our essence, the soul of us isn't any of those things. It is kind of. I was listening to I Am with Johnny Wilkinson. I don't know whether you've listened to any or many of his. He's got a podcast, and as someone who was at the very pinnacle of a highly competitive sport, was globally known, was a real kind of you just push through, you work harder, you practice longer, you kind of self you beat yourself up until you get better. He's been on this massive journey
Mm.
where he's where I got that idea of, or he introduced me to the separation of the I from all that I experience. And I think it's for me, it was a massively transformative moment and a really powerful um, idea to come back to constantly. Because you're absolutely right. When we talk about emotions, it's like, well, we're only allowed to have positive emotions.
Mm.
And there seems to be this drive for them to be permanent. And it's, well, I'm permanently happy, creating a life that is full of joy. Well, that's what we ideally, I guess, would want. But is it? Because that's only part of the emotions that we have at our disposal. And if we are only experiencing joy, what are we learning? How are we growing? How are we adapting to the fact that we're getting older and things mean different things to us, or meanings change as we get older? And that concept of two seemingly opposing and conflicting things can be true at the same time. So I can love and hate something at the same time. The and aim that at a single thing. And if we're constantly scrabbling to try to suppress one type of emotion and elevate another, then when that happens, we do start to question, what the hell is wrong with me? And the answer is nothing, absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? And if you know, on my Instagram pages, I do put quite a few positive affirmations, as if like it's really easy to feel this. It's really easy to feel calm and at ease. And even at the end of my yoga sessions, I like to put a quote or a feeling or an intention for people to then take into what we call shavasana, the last, which is corpse pose, as it's translated to.
Yeah.
Again, letting go of that idea of we are more than just the physical body, which I think also goes into we are not our emotions. Like, this is our physical body to experience life in. However, we are human beings. So I love to talk about the humanness of us in that as well. And but those I'm digressing a bit, but those positive affirmations, those really beautiful ways of trying to make us feel calm, connected, isn't always easy.
No.
And you know, and quite often in class, you probably would think that everyone's lying there in shavasana, blissed out. And actually, if the reality was, and we managed to do a little kind of camera on what was going on in people's minds, it would be very busy, flittering from here and there. And it is a practice of coming back to self, coming back to a center. And with that, I think there is that opportunity to not be attached to the emotion, not be attached to the story that's we've turned up with on that day, or what's happened before we got to class, or what's going to happen when we get out. And it gives that space for that exploration of, oh, okay, I'm feeling this. Oh no, now I'm not feeling that. And oh, I'm feeling this.
Yeah, it's having practiced and trained as a yoga teacher as well. That element of shavasana is, for me, very, to begin with, I resisted it strongly because I was exactly as you described, mind like a bag of crazy squirrels, and I felt I wasn't doing it right. And then you kind of get into self-judgment. Whereas where I've moved to through the practice and through all the work over the last 10 years is every emotion and every moment of resistance, every moment where I feel compelled to choke back my emotions or let them flow is an opportunity to learn something about myself. And it's always about myself. It's never about the person or the situation that has, I feel, has triggered that reaction. It's always about, this is about me, because they're my emotions. What are the, and I firmly believe they're, I can't remember who I first heard say it, but emotions are energy in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't, we can suppress them, but we can't make them go away. And that energy is, you know, you can't destroy it and you can't create it. You can just process it from one state into another. So whatever the emotion is, if we don't feel it, we don't process it. And we kind of have this society that doesn't teach us how to feel and process our emotions.
And that's where you're saying, like, that's the growth, right? Like,
Yeah.
so when we feel disconnected or we feel uncomfortable, when we start to recognize that this is a lesson or this is an opportunity for growth or self-exploration, then that is actually amazing, but it feels absolutely horrible. Like, it feels so horrible. And I think that's where people shy away from, as we could always call it, doing the work, because
Yeah.
it is uncomfortable to do it. And I think, again, this is why this podcast feels, I'm passionate about it, because it's like, we know that feeling. We're not sat here pretending we've got it all together, because
Yeah,
we
God, yeah.
haven't. And I don't think there'll ever be an end point to it. And I think once you start to recognize that it doesn't matter how many podcasts you listen to or how many books you read, even if you went back to a podcast or you reread the book, you'll be in a different place at that point to learn something again from it. So it's constant, but it's uncomfortable. But I personally feel to either unravel or and with that then grow, or recognizing the potential that perhaps we didn't even know was even possible because we've protected ourselves in our little world. We're not good enough. We say all the negative things about, what, or like we talked about the perfectionism, and or not intelligent enough is something that always comes up. You take all of that away because someone carefully supports you, or you decide you want to look at that and move through it, then it's unbelievable the transformation that then can happen.
Yeah. You said about going back and reading a book again or listening to a podcast again. Going back to John, the first I heard Johnny Wilkinson talk about his story was on the High Performance podcast. And this was 5 or 6 years, maybe 5 years ago. And I didn't understand 95% of what he was talking about. But the way he was talking about the separation of I and our experiences and all those kind of things. And just how he was talking about it was like, I want more of this. I want to understand more. And I go back and listen to that podcast at least once a year. And it's exactly as you say, I'm different. The podcast is exactly the same because it's recorded in time, but I have changed and grown. So every time I listen, I understand a little bit more. And even the bits that I thought I understood, I'm now interpreting in a different way because I have changed. I have got more deeply connected with who I really am, that all of who I am. And am I at the end of that journey? No, as you say, there's far too much evidence in my life that gently the universe is prompting me to do more work. But that there's massive joy for me in having realized that, because if there's no end to the journey, then it's okay where I am. Of course it is, and it's okay for me to pause periodically and then go, I've kind of take my foot, let's get back to it and recommit to the work. So I'm super excited about the possibility and potential of the conversations we're going to have. But one other thing I wanted to quickly say was, I think this is a real opportunity. We've had this conversation. A lot of the wellness space, because it has been capitalized, it's an industry, a huge, vast money-making industry. There's an awful lot of quick, easy, let me tell you what to do and you'll get these results, you'll be good. And you making the point that the work keeps going. It's like this is the daily practices that help us understand ourselves better. And then on the other hand, you've got really popular podcasts and books that I feel as a society, we've got fixated with ultimate performance. And everywhere you look, you see people talking about, if you want to be in the 1%, this is how you do it. You grind and you hustle. And if you're not willing to, and these are 10 things you have to do. And one of the problems I have with that is, what about the other 99%? Like 8 billion people on this planet. And if all of the teaching is focused on 1% or trying to be in the 1%, then what about everybody else? And even if you look at it as when was the last time you were in a room with 100 people in it? All of that stuff is talking to one of those people. So I think we have an opportunity through our own, like you said, our own experiences, the work we have done, and the fact that we don't know the answers. We're working through this as we go. We have come across some approaches, some philosophies, some techniques, some tools that have worked for us. There's an opportunity to share those things. But I think the biggest message for me from me is be open to new ideas. And if your life
Absolutely.
isn't where you want it to be, it's okay to move it to where you want it to be. Is going to take new thinking, new ideas, new approaches.
Yeah, and that takes work.
It does. Woohoo! We all love work.
And but also I think we need to also be mindful that some people are quite happy with where they're at, and
Yeah,
actually just wanting to maintain that even when life challenges come in, like you're saying, it's always about growth and uh, what is it that you want to visualize in your life and make it happen. Well, maybe people don't always want to do that either. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not sure if they're going to be the people that are going to listen to this podcast, but
But people will
ultimately
encounter people like that at least.
there's nothing wrong with that either,
Yeah,
and already going, do you know what? I'm enough. We are all enough as we are now. Maybe you don't want to explore, and that's totally cool too. Um, but I think that I personally would like to be as authentic in terms of social media, pictures, how we show ourselves up in the world, besides being in living our life, other people living our life with us, can be so deluded. And I want to be like, do you know what? It's messy. It's messy being human. It's there's the weeks that I feel like I'm winning at life, and there's weeks when I feel like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this for 15 years of self-exploration, and what, I'm still dealing with this stuff right now,
yeah,
and being really, really transparent with that, because
yeah,
I think there's too much of not, putting the filters on. We know that, making everything look pretty. And some people are bloody brilliant at social media, that they might be really good, but actually their content and what they're delivering isn't of depth. And I personally, my intention for us to share what we're going to be sharing over the next series is reality
yeah.
and
I was,
humanness.
yeah. There was, I think you're aware of the lady as well, Charlie Bezic. She has a
Oh yeah.
son who was born with some congenital issues. She had issues, disabilities. I never know the technique. I don't know what, when you kind of fumble around a topic, you say again, Christ, I don't want to offend anybody. I'm not deeply exposed to that, so it doesn't directly impact me. I know it has impacted you, so my knowledge is really, I'm tiptoeing into the water because I don't know, but I am
And
very much aware.
saying that, don't worry, because even being a family that was heavily more disabled than able-bodied, I still fumble on what is the right terminology. So, we can wrap
Okay,
ourselves up. So please don't worry about
okay,
that from my point
cool.
of view.
Okay, so I think what we're saying is this is going to be an opportunity for open conversation where mistakes are welcome because that's how we learn.
Mm.
But yeah, Charlie had a post today which was really honest and raw and was talking about the day her son was born. And she had just a line in her post that she calls the lie we wear, because she was falling apart inside and had deeply dark thoughts. But on externally, she was smiles and, oh yeah, I've just started a family, and oh no, we're fine. We're going to get through this. Of course, we're going to get through this. That not embodying the positivity she was talking, which is essentially what you were talking about, right? Social media is a projection,
Mm.
and what sits behind is very, very different. And for me, part of this is opening those conversations and being open about our own struggles, our own experiences, even on a day-to-day basis. I have no desire to share my wounds, as Brené Brown says, but I'm more than happy to share my scars.
I totally agree. And it's really interesting even that, because I don't get triggered when people show their wounds, but I feel that sometimes they're going through a process that they're sharing openly on social media, where they're using it as a tool to support themselves through the healing. But
Mm-hmm.
that can be incredibly uncomfortable to read or listen to. Yet, from my experience of observing people that do that, they are the posts that get the most likes. They're the ones that get the most audience. And I'm not sure if that's for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So I'm very much like you. I'm happy to share my experiences, but they are, like you said, they are more healed, they're more scars rather than the deep, deep wounds.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay. Is there anything as an introductory episode? I think we've actually covered quite a lot of ground. Is there anything else you would like to add specifically about what the episodes are going to be like, or your sense of all that we are? We're going to cover lots over the next 9 or 10 weeks. But if there's anything else specifically you want to add now about that, then we can wrap up and let people know how to get in touch with us and things like that.
I feel that just to acknowledge that we're both coming from very, very different walks of life with very different
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
So our audience will hopefully get a really good all-rounded kind of view
Yeah.
and perspective.
It's funny, isn't it? We had this conversation quite recently that I said, even as recently as 6 or 7 years ago, you would have been far too, in my words at the time, woo-woo for me. Definitely. And just the and that I think is just demonstrates how far we can move when we let go of some of the certainties we hold that aren't serving us. Because I love talking to you, and we train together on our coaching course. And for me, I came from a show me the science, and we would not have spent much time together back then.
No, and I would have been exactly taking off my sparkles of my stars to make sure that you accepted me. And so I'd end up then shape shifting into mirroring you and being you as much
Yeah.
as I could, or not even speaking at all, feeling that, oh no, I'm on I haven't got anything to say. It's not what I'm going to say is not of worth.
Yeah. And that, bearing in mind, I was miserable in my certainty. I was deeply unhappy.
Mm.
And not only would I have kept myself unhappy, but I would have, and I'm not taking blame on that. It's just how we can be. But then for you to be less happy trying to fit in with someone who's miserable it kind of blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah, but now here we are.
Look at us.
And we'll talk about all sorts.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
they're, again, hopefully the audience will feel the same, but we bounce off each other, we challenge each other, we don't agree with each other, but we respect each other's opinions and outlook.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, because I think this is all going to be about ideas. It's all going to be about conversation, and nobody has to solve anything. It literally is intended to give people things to reflect on. Take what you like, leave the rest behind, make your own patchwork. It's all coming from the best intentions and a desire to help people who feel they would benefit from some help.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And life is full of contradictions. So,
Indeed.
everything that I listened to recently, then I listen to something else and I'm like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense because they're saying something else. So again, it's learning to trust your own inner knowing. And I think
Yeah.
that's where I come from with the way I approach things is learning to listen to that inner voice, the essence of who you are, the intuitive part of who you are, because there's a lot of noise out there and there's a lot of information, and it's learning to decipher, and like you said, what lands will land and what doesn't land is not meant to, and that will shift and change too. So
Yeah.
it's the fluidity of it all.
Couldn't agree more. Lovely. So before we wrap up our first episode, there are a couple of things I'd like to do. First off, we're really interested in what any of our listeners have to say. Any of the any topics people would like us to discuss, any areas that people are particularly struggling with. We are going to come with some ideas for these episodes. But if there is anything that you would like us to talk about that you particularly are struggling with, let us know. You can get in touch with the show via email at the all that we are podcast at gmail.com. Please feel free. All of that will be anonymous. But we want to talk about we talk to each other anyway. So what we'd like to do is talk about things that you might find helpful. Um, Lisa, this is our first episode, so why don't you let people know a little bit about what you've got going on, where they can find you to learn a bit more about what you do.
Okay, so I guess the Yoga Being is where is the company, it's my name for offering yoga classes, yoga retreats, and yoga one-to-one, because I do yoga therapy. Got a fabulous retreat coming up in May. It's in beautiful countryside of Dorset. It really is an opportunity to unplug and unwind. There's only a few spaces left, but I can, from being unwell in the last few weeks, which has kind of made this has taken a little longer to come into fruition. I highly recommend that you unplug from the world and give
Yeah.
yourself that time, because it's invaluable. And then my coaching, I have a separate website for it. It's lisamaniartist.com. And we explore. So I was asking some of my clients the other day, like, how would you describe my coaching? They said, I basically can come and talk to you about anything. So I wouldn't say that I'm niching. I'm here. I obviously bring in all of what my holistic background, my yoga background, and my own personal experience, and offer one-to-one sessions, which you are more than welcome to come and explore with me. And how
Wonderful.
about you, Wyndham?
Yeah, so for me, you can find my website is wyndhamjames.com. Wyndham is spelled Wyndham. Surname is James.com. So I spend most of my time coaching. One-to-one, again, I haven't really niched. I typically talk about working with the miserably successful, which I quite like because it makes me memorable. But I did have somebody contact me on LinkedIn 3 or 4 days ago saying, I quite like your concept. I've got a series of videos on my website called Let's Talk About the Blueprint. I call myself the Blueprint Coach because I think we all have a blueprint. And for most of us, we're not really aware of it. And we aren't aware that it automates our reactions to what goes on around us and to us. And until we interrupt that, whose life are we really living? But he got in touch with me and said, I like all of that. I'm not miserable though, so I don't know whether you're the right coach for me. And it was like, oh, damn. But yeah, so please head over to my website, wyndhamjames.com. Have a look around. If anything strikes you as interesting, let me know. There's a free download on there as well. So if you sign up to what is a so infrequent as to never have been sent newsletter, you will get a free download of the companion book of inalienable truths. And that is 50 truths that I have come to that essentially help me navigate my life. They expose what is rather than the stories we tell ourselves. I think there's only one other thing to cover, and that is what we are going to cover next episode. Can I give you two choices and you pick the one we talk about? We will eventually cover the other one anyway. Are you okay with that?
I'm absolutely fine with that.
This is the bit we didn't talk about beforehand.
That's okay. Going with it.
So, two choices: imposter syndrome or perfectionism.
So I've got to answer that,
Yeah,
right?
you just pick one and we'll
Okay,
talk
I'm
about
going to
that.
go with perfectionism.
Okay, cool. So next episode, we will be talking about perfectionism. If anybody wants to share their thoughts on perfectionism, you have that email, the all that we are podcast at gmail.com, the all that we are podcast at gmail.com. Please let us know. Any insight, any thoughts, any personal experiences would be really useful to help us shape a conversation. Other than that, I think that is us and our first episode done. Lisa, thank you so much for your time.
And yours too.
And we will be back in a couple of weeks.
We will. Looking
Thank
forward
you
to
very
it
much.
already.
Say that again. I missed you.
I said I'm looking forward to it already.
Perfect.
Although
Wonderful.
perfectionism is like my a barrier. So it'll be interesting.
Can you imagine why I picked it as one of the two?
Of course, I know.
Anyway, we will leave you with that. Thank you so much. If you have enjoyed this episode, like it, review it. If you haven't, don't bother. If you've enjoyed it and you think other people will like it, please share it with them. We really want this to make a difference. So we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much.